Gorgias by Plato, translated by Donald J. Zeal. Part 2. Polus.
What is it you're saying, then? You think oratory is flattery? I said that it was a part of flattery. Don't you remember, Polus, young as you are? What's to become of you? So you think that good orators are held in low regard in their cities as flatterers? Is this a question you're asking, or some speech you're beginning? I'm asking a question. I don't think they're held in any regard at all. What do you mean they're not held in any regard? Don't they have the greatest power in their cities? No, if by having power you mean something that's good for the one who has the power. That's just what I do mean. In that case, I think that orators have the least power of any in the city. Really? Don't they, like tyrants, put to death anyone they want and confiscate the property and banish from their cities anyone they see fit? By the dog, Polus, I can't make out one way or the other with each thing you're saying, whether you're saying these things for yourself and revealing your own view, or whether you're questioning me. I'm questioning you. Very well, my friend. In that case, are you asking me two questions at once? What do you mean, two? Weren't you just now saying something like, don't orators like tyrants put to death anyone they want? Don't they confiscate the property of anyone they see fit? And don't they banish them from their cities? Yes, I was. In that case, I said that these are two questions, and I'll answer you both of them. I say, Polus, that both orators and tyrants have the least power in their cities, as I was saying just now, for they do just about nothing they want to, though they certainly do whatever they see most fit to do. Well, isn't this having great power? No, at least Polus says it isn't. I say it isn't. I certainly say it is. You certainly don't, since you say that having great power is good for the one who has it. Yes, I do say that. Do you think it's good, then, if a person does whatever he sees most fit to do when he lacks intelligence? Do you call this having great power, too? No, I do not. Will you refute me, then, and prove that orators do have intelligence and that oratory is a craft and not flattery? If you leave me unrefuted, then the orators who do what they see fit in their cities, and the tyrants, too, won't have gained any good by this power. Power is a good thing, you say, but you agree with me that doing what one sees fit without intelligence is bad, or don't you? Yes, I do. How then could it be that orators or tyrants have great power in their cities, so long as Socrates is not refuted by Polus to show that they do what they want? This fellow denies that they do what they want. Go ahead and refute me. Didn't you just now agree that they do what they see fit? Yes, and I still do. Don't they do what they want, then? I say they don't, even though they do what they see fit. That's what I say. What an outrageous thing to say, Socrates, perfectly monstrous. Don't attack me, my peerless Polus, to address you in your own style. Instead, question me if you can, and prove that I'm wrong. Otherwise, you must answer me. All right, I'm willing to answer to get some idea of what you're saying. Do you think that when people do something, they want the thing they're doing at the time, or the thing for the sake of which they're doing what they're doing? Do you think that people who take medicines prescribed by their doctors, for instance, want what they're doing, the act of taking the medicine, with all its discomfort, or do they want to be healthy, the thing for the sake of which they're taking it? Obviously, they want their being healthy. With seafarers, too, and those who make money in other ways, the thing they're doing at the time is not the thing they want, for who wants to make dangerous and troublesome sea voyages? What they want is their being wealthy, the thing for the sake of which, I suppose, they make their voyages. It's for the sake of wealth that they make them. Yes, that's right. Isn't it just the same in all cases, in fact? If a person does anything for the sake of something, he doesn't want this thing that he's doing, but the thing for the sake of which he's doing it. Yes. Now, is there anything that isn't either good or bad, or what is between these, neither good or bad? There can't be, Socrates. Do you say that wisdom, health, wealth, and the like are good, and their opposites bad? Yes, I do. And by things which are neither good nor bad, you mean things which sometimes partake of what's good, and sometimes of what's bad, and sometimes of neither, such as sitting or walking, running or making sea voyages, or stones and sticks and the like. Aren't these the ones you mean? Or are there any others that you call things neither good nor bad? No, these are the ones. Now, whenever people do things, do they do these intermediate things for the sake of good ones, or the good things for the sake of the intermediate ones? The intermediate things for the sake of the good ones, surely. So it's because we pursue what's good that we walk whenever we walk. We suppose that it's better to walk. And conversely, whenever we stand still for the sake of the same thing, what's good. Isn't that so? Yes. And don't we also put a person to death if we do, or banish him and confiscate his property, because we suppose that doing that is better for us than not doing it? That's right. Hence, it's for the sake of what's good that those who do all these things do them. I agree. Now, didn't we agree that we want not those things that we do for the sake of something, but that thing for the sake of which we do them? Yes, very much so. Hence, we don't simply want to slaughter people or exile them from their cities and confiscate their property as such. We want to do these things if they are beneficial. But if they're harmful, we don't. For we want the things that are good, as you agree. We don't want those things that are neither good nor bad, nor those that are bad, right? Do you think that what I'm saying is true, Polus, or don't you? Why don't you answer? I think it's true. Since we're in agreement about that, then, if a person who's a tyrant or an orator puts somebody to death or exiles him or confiscates his property because he supposes that doing so is better for himself, when actually it's worse, this person, I take it, is doing what he sees fit, isn't he? Yes. And is he also doing what he wants if these things are actually bad? Why don't you answer? All right, I don't think he's doing what he wants. Can such a man possibly have great power in that city if, in fact, having great power is, as you agree, something good? He cannot. So what I was saying is true when I said that it is possible for a man who does in his city what he sees fit not to have great power, nor to be doing what he wants. Really, Socrates, as if you wouldn't welcome being in a position to do what you see fit in the city rather than not, as if you wouldn't be envious whenever you'd see anyone putting to death some person he saw fit, or confiscating his property, or tying him up. Justly, you mean, or unjustly? Whichever way he does it, isn't he to be envied either way? Hush, Polus. What for? Because you're not supposed to envy the unenviable or the miserable. You're supposed to pity them. Really? Is this how you think it is with the people I'm talking about? Of course. So you think that a person who puts to death anyone he sees fit and does so justly is miserable and to be pitied? No, I don't, but I don't think he's to be envied either. Weren't you just now saying that he's miserable? Yes, the one who puts someone to death unjustly is, my friend, and he's to be pitied besides. But the one who does so justly isn't to be envied. Surely the one who's put to death unjustly is the one who's both to be pitied and miserable. Less so than the one putting him to death, Polus, and less than the one who's justly put to death. How can that be, Socrates? It's because doing what's unjust is actually the greatest of evils. Really? Is that the greatest? Isn't suffering what's unjust a greater one? No, not in the least. So you'd want to suffer what's unjust rather than do it? I certainly wouldn't want either, but if it had to be one or the other, I would choose suffering over doing what's unjust. You wouldn't welcome being a tyrant, then? No, if by being a tyrant you mean what I do. I mean just what I said a while ago, to be in a position to do whatever you see fit in the city, whether it's putting people to death or exiling them or doing any and everything just as you see fit. Well, my wonderful fellow, I'll put you a case and you criticize it. Imagine me in a crowded marketplace with a dagger up my sleeve, saying to you, Polus, I've just got myself some marvelous tyrannical power. So if I see fit to have any one of these people you see here put to death right on the spot, to death he'll be put. And if I see fit to have one of them have his head bashed in it will be right away. If I see fit to have his coat ripped apart, ripped it will be. That's how great my power in this city is. Suppose you didn't believe me and I showed you the dagger. On seeing it, you'd be likely to say, but Socrates, everybody could have great power that way. For this way any house you see fit might be burned down, and so might the dockyards and the triremes of the Athenians, and all their ships, both public and private. But then that's not what having great power is, doing what one sees fit. Or do you think it is? No, at least not like that. Can you then tell me what your reason is for objecting to this sort of power? Yes, I can. What is it? Tell me. It's that the person who acts this way is necessarily punished. And isn't being punished a bad thing? Yes, it really is. Well then, my surprising fellow, here again you take the view that as long as acting as one sees fit coincides with acting beneficially, it is good. And this, evidently, is having great power. Otherwise, it is a bad thing, and is having little power. Let's consider this point too. Do we agree that sometimes it's better to do those things we were just now talking about, putting people to death and banishing them and confiscating their property, and at other times it isn't? Yes, we do. This point is evidently agreed upon by you and me both. Yes. When do you say that it is better to do these things, then? Tell me where you draw the line. Why don't you answer that question yourself, Socrates? Well then, Polus, if you find it more pleasing to listen to me, I say that when one does these things justly, it's better, but when one does them unjustly, it's worse. How hard it is to refute you, Socrates. Why, even a child could refute you and show that what you're saying isn't true. In that case, I'll be very grateful to the child, and just as grateful to you if you refute me and rid me of this nonsense. Please don't falter now in doing a friend a good turn. Refute me. Surely, Socrates, we don't need to refer to ancient history to refute you. Why, current events quite suffice to do that, and to prove that many people who behave unjustly are happy. What sort of events are these? You can picture this man Archelaus, the son of Perdiccas, ruling Macedonia, I take it. Well, if I can't picture him, I do hear things about him. Do you think he's happy or miserable? I don't know, Polus. I haven't met the man yet. Really? You'd know this if you had met him, but without that you don't know straight off that he's happy? No, I certainly don't, by Zeus. It's obvious, Socrates, that you won't even claim to know that the great king is happy. Yes, and that would be true, for I don't know how he stands in regard to education and justice. Really? Is happiness determined entirely by that? Yes, Polus, so I say anyway. I say that the admirable and good person, man or woman, is happy, but that the one who's unjust and wicked is miserable. So on your reasoning, this man Archelaus is miserable. Yes, my friend, if he is in fact unjust. Why, of course he's unjust. The sovereignty which he now holds doesn't belong to him at all, given the fact that his mother was a slave of Alcetus and Perdiccas' brother. By rights, he was a slave of Alcetus, and if he wanted to do what's just, he'd still be a slave to Alcetus, and on your reasoning would be happy. As it is, how marvelously miserable he's turned out to be, now that he's committed the most heinous crimes. First he sends for this man, his very own master and uncle, on the pretext of restoring him the sovereignty that Perdiccas had taken from him. He entertains him, gets him drunk, both him and his son Alexander, on his own cousin and boy about his own age. Then he throws them into a wagon, drives it away at night, and slaughters and disposes of them both. And although he has committed these crimes, he remains unaware of how miserable he's become, and feels no remorse either. He refuses to become happy by justly bringing up his brother and conferring the sovereignty upon him, the legitimate son of Perdiccas, a boy of about 7 to whom the sovereignty was by rights due to come. Instead, not long afterward, he throws him into a well and drowns him, telling the boy's mother, Cleopatra, that he fell into the well chasing a goose and lost his life. For this very reason now, because he's committed the most terrible of crimes of any in Macedonia, he's the most miserable of all Macedonians instead of the happiest, and no doubt there are some in Athens, beginning with yourself, who'd prefer being any other Macedonian at all to being Archelaus. Already at the start of our discussion, Polus, I praised you because I thought you were well educated in oratory, but I also thought that you had neglected the practice of discussion. And now is this all there is to the argument by which even a child could refute me, And do you suppose that when I say that a person who acts unjustly is not happy, I now stand refuted by you by means of this argument? Where did you get that idea, my good man? As a matter of fact, I disagree with every single thing you say. You're just unwilling to admit it. You really do think it's this way. I say it is. My wonderful man, you're trying to refute me in oratorical style, the way people in law courts do when they think they're refuting some claim. There, too, one side thinks it's refuting the other when it produces many reputable witnesses on behalf of the arguments it presents, while the person who asserts the opposite produces only one witness, or none at all. This refutation is worthless as far as truth is concerned, for it might happen sometimes that an individual is brought down by the false testimony of many reputable people. Now, too, nearly every Athenian and alien will take your side on the things you're saying, if it's witnesses you want to produce against me to show that what I say isn't true. Nicias, the son of Nicoratus, will testify for you, if you like, and his brothers along with him, and the ones whose tripods are standing in a row in the precinct of Dionysus. Aristocrates, the son of Celius, will too, if you like, the one to whom that handsome votive offering in the precinct of Pythian Apollo brings, and so will the whole house of Pericles, if you like, or any other local family you care to choose. Nevertheless, though I'm only one person, I don't agree with you. You don't compel me. Instead, you produce many false witnesses against me and try to banish me from my property, the truth. For my part, if I don't produce you as a single witness to agree with me what I'm saying, then I suppose I've achieved nothing worth mentioning concerning the things we've been discussing. And I suppose you haven't either, if I don't testify on your side, though I'm just one person, and you disregard all these other people. There is, then, this style of refutation, the one you and many others accept. There's also another, one that I accept. Let's compare the one with the other and see if they'll differ in any way. It's true, after all, that the matters in dispute between us are not at all insignificant ones, but pretty nearly those it's most admirable to have knowledge about, and most shameful not to. For the heart of the matter is that of recognizing or failing to recognize who is happy and who is not. To take first the immediate question our present discussion's about, you believe that it's possible for a man who behaves unjustly and who is unjust to be happy, since you believe Archelaus to be both unjust and happy. Are we to understand that this is precisely your view? That's right. And I say that that's impossible. This is one point in dispute between us. Fair enough. Although he acts unjustly, he'll be happy. That is, if he gets his due punishment. Oh, no, certainly not. That's how he'd be the most miserable. But if a man who acts unjustly doesn't get his due, then, on your reasoning, he'll be happy? That's what I say. On my view of it, Polus, a man who acts unjustly, a man who is unjust, is thoroughly miserable, the more so if he doesn't get his due punishment for the wrongdoing he commits, the less so if he pays and receives what is due at the hands of both gods and men. What an absurd position you're trying to maintain, Socrates. Yes, and I'll try to get you to take the same position too, my good man, for I consider you a friend. For now, these are the points we differ on. Please look at them with me. I said earlier, didn't I, that doing what's unjust is worse than suffering it? Yes, you did. And you say that suffering it is worse. Yes. And I say that those who do what's unjust are miserable, and was refuted by you. You certainly were, by Zeus. So you think, Polus. So I truly think. Perhaps. And again you think that those who do what's unjust are happy, so long as they don't pay what is due. I certainly do, whereas I say that they're the most miserable, while those who pay their due are less so. Would you like to refute this too? Why, that's even more difficult to refute than the other claim, Socrates. Not difficult, surely, Polus. It's impossible. What's true is never refuted. What do you mean? Take a man who's caught doing something unjust, say plotting to set himself up as tyrant. Suppose that he's caught, put on the rack, castrated, and has his eyes burned out. Suppose that he's subjected to a host of other abuses of all sorts, and then made to witness his wife and children undergo the same. In the end, he's impaled or tarred. Will he be happier than if he hadn't got caught, had set himself up as tyrant, and lived out his life ruling in his city and doing whatever he liked, a person envied and counted happy by his fellow citizens and aliens alike? Is this what you say is impossible to refute? This time you're spooking me, Polus, instead of refuting me. Just before you were arguing by testimony. Still, refresh my memory on a small point. If the man plots to set himself up as tyrant unjustly, you said. Yes, I did. In that case, neither of them will ever be the happier one, neither the one who gains tyrannical power unjustly, nor the one who pays what is due. For of two miserable people, one could not be happier than the other. But the one who avoids getting caught and becomes a tyrant is the more miserable one. What's this, Polus? You're laughing? Is this now some further style of refutation, to laugh when somebody makes a point instead of refuting him? Don't you think you've been refuted already, Socrates, when you're saying things the likes of which no human being would maintain? Just ask any one of these people. Polus, I'm not one of the politicians. Last year I was elected to the council by lot, and when our tribe was presiding and I had to call for a vote, I came in for a laugh. I didn't know how to do it. So please don't tell me to call for a vote from the people present here. If you have no better refutations than these to offer, do as I suggested just now. Let me have my turn, and you try the kind of refutation I think is called for. For I do know how to produce one witness to whatever I'm saying, and that's the man I'm having a discussion with. The majority I disregard, and I do know how to call for a vote from one man, but I don't even discuss things with the majority. See if you're willing to give me a refutation, then, by answering the questions you're asked. For I do believe that you and I and everybody else consider doing what's unjust worse than suffering it, and not paying what is due worse than paying it. And I do believe that I don't, and that no other person does either. So you'd take suffering what's unjust over doing it, would you? Yes, and so would you and everyone else. Far from it. I wouldn't, you wouldn't, and nobody else would either. Won't you answer, then? I certainly will. I'm eager to know what you'll say, in fact. So that you'll know, answer me as though this were my first question to you. Which do you think is worse, Polus, doing what's unjust or suffering it? I think suffering it is. You do. Which do you think is more shameful, doing what's unjust or suffering it? Tell me. Doing it. Now, if doing it is in fact more shameful, isn't it also worse? No, not in the least. I see. Evidently you don't believe that admirable and good are the same, or that bad and shameful are. No, I certainly don't. Well, what about this? When you call admirable things admirable, bodies, for example, or colors, shapes, and sounds, or practices, is it with nothing in view that you do so each time? Take admirable bodies first. Don't you call them admirable either in virtue of their usefulness, relative to whatever it is that each is useful for, or else in virtue of some pleasure, if it makes the people who look at them get enjoyment from looking at them? In the case of the admirability of a body, can you mention anything other than these? No, I can't. Does the same hold for all the other things? Don't you call shapes and colors admirable on account of either some pleasure or benefit or both? Yes, I do. Doesn't this also hold for sounds and all things musical? Yes, and certainly things that pertain to laws and practices, the admirable ones, that is, don't fall outside the limits of being either pleasant or beneficial, or both, I take it. No, I don't think they do. Doesn't the same hold for the admirability of the fields of learning, too? Yes, indeed. Yes, Socrates, your present definition of the admirable in terms of pleasure and good is an admirable one. And so is my definition of the shameful in terms of the opposite, pain and evil, isn't it? Necessarily so. Therefore, whenever one of two admirable things is more admirable than the other, it is so because it surpasses the other in one of these, pleasure or benefit, or in both. Yes, that's right. And whenever one of two shameful things is more shameful than the other, it will be so because it surpasses the other in pain or in evil. Isn't that necessarily so? Yes. Well now, what were we saying a moment ago about doing what's unjust and suffering it? Weren't you saying that suffering it is more evil, but doing it is more shameful? I was. Now, if doing what's unjust is in fact more shameful than suffering it, wouldn't it be so either because it is more painful and surpasses the other in pain, or because it surpasses it in evil, or both? Isn't that necessarily so too? Of course it is. Let's look at this first. Does doing what's unjust surpass suffering it in pain, and do people who do it hurt more than people who suffer it? No, Socrates, that's not the case at all. So it doesn't surpass it in pain anyhow. Certainly not. So if it doesn't surpass it in pain, it couldn't at this point surpass it in both. Apparently not. This leaves it surpassing it only in the other thing. Yes, in evil, evidently. So because it surpasses it in evil, doing what's unjust would be more evil than suffering it. That's clear. Now, didn't the majority of mankind, and you earlier, agree with us that doing what's unjust is more shameful than suffering it? Yes, and now at least it's turned out to be more evil, evidently. Would you then welcome what's more evil and what's more shameful over what is less so? Don't shrink back from answering, Polus. You won't get hurt in any way. Submit yourself nobly to the argument, as you would to a doctor, and answer me. Say yes or no to what I ask you. No, I wouldn't, Socrates. And would any other person? No, I don't think so, not on this reasoning anyhow. I was right then when I said that neither you nor I nor any other person would take doing what's unjust over suffering it, for it really is more evil. So it appears. So you see, Polus, that when the one refutation is compared to the other, there's no resemblance at all, whereas everyone but me agrees with you. You are all I need, although you're just a party of one, for your agreement and testimony. It's you alone whom I call on for a vote. The others I disregard. Let this be our verdict on this matter, then. Let's next consider the second point in dispute between us, that is, whether a wrongdoer's paying what is due is the greatest of evils, as you were supposing, or whether his not paying it is a greater one, as I was. Let's look at it this way. Do you call paying what is due and being justly disciplined for wrongdoing the same? Yes, I do. Can you say, then, that all just things aren't admirable insofar as they are just? Think carefully and tell me. Yes, I think they are. Consider this point too. If somebody acts upon something, there is necessarily also something that has something done to it by the one acting upon it. Yes, I think so. And that it has done to it what the thing acting upon it does, and in the sort of way the thing acting upon it does it. I mean, for example, that if somebody hits, there's necessarily something that is being hit. Necessarily. And if the hitter hits hard or quickly, the thing being hit is hit that way too. Yes. So the thing being hit gets acted upon in whatever way the hitting thing acts upon it. Yes, that's right. So too, if somebody performs surgical burning, then necessarily something is being burned. Of course. And if he burns severely or painfully, the thing that's being burned is burned in whatever way the burning thing burns it. That's right. Doesn't the same account also hold if a person makes a surgical cut, for something is being cut? Yes. And if the cut is large or deep or painful, the thing being cut is cut in whatever way the cutting thing cuts it. So it appears. Summing it up, see if you agree with what I was saying just now, that in all cases, in whatever way the thing acting upon something acts upon it, the thing acted upon is acted upon in just that way. Yes, I do agree. Taking this as agreed, is paying what is due a case of being acted upon or of acting upon something? It's necessarily a case of being acted upon, Socrates, by someone who acts. Of course, by the one administering discipline. Now, one who disciplines correctly disciplines justly. Yes. Thereby acting justly or not? Yes, justly. So the one being disciplined is being acted upon justly when he pays what is due. Apparently. And it was agreed, I take it, that just things are admirable? That's right. So one of these men does admirable things, and the other, the one being disciplined, has admirable things done to him. Yes. If they're admirable, then, aren't they good? For they're either pleasant or beneficial. Necessarily so. Hence, the one paying what is due has good things being done to him. Evidently. Hence, he's being benefited. Yes. Is this benefit the one I take it to be? Does his soul undergo improvement if he's justly disciplined? Yes, that's likely. Hence, one who pays what is due gets rid of evil in his soul. Yes. Now, is the evil he gets rid of the most serious one? Consider it this way. In the matter of a person's financial condition, do you detect any evil other than poverty? No, just poverty. What about that of a person's physical condition? Would you say that evil here consists of weakness, disease, ugliness, and the like? Yes, I would. Do you believe that there's also some corrupt condition of the soul? Of course. And don't you call this condition injustice, ignorance, cowardice, and the like? Yes, certainly. Of these three things, one's finances, one's body, and one's soul, you said there are three states of corruption, namely poverty, disease, and injustice. Yes. Which of these states of corruption is the most shameful? Isn't it injustice and corruption of one's soul in general? Very much so. And if it's the most shameful, it's also the most evil. What do you mean, Socrates? I mean this. What we agreed on earlier implies that what's most shameful is so always because it's the source either of the greatest pain or of harm or of both. Very much so. And now we've agreed that injustice and corruption of soul as a whole is the most shameful thing. So we have. So either it's most painful and is most shameful because it surpasses the others in pain, or else in harm, or in both. Necessarily so. Now, is being unjust, undisciplined, cowardly, and ignorant more painful than being poor or sick? No, I don't think so, Socrates, given what we've said anyhow. So the reason that corruption of one's soul is the most shameful of them all is that it surpasses the others by some monstrously great harm and astounding evil, since it doesn't surpass them in pain, according to your reasoning. So it appears. But what is surpassing in greatest harm would, I take it, certainly be the greatest evil there is, yes? Injustice, then, lack of discipline, and all other forms of corruption of soul are the greatest evil there is. Apparently so. Now, what is the craft that gets rid of poverty? Isn't it that of financial management? Yes. What's the one that gets rid of disease? Isn't it that of medicine? Necessarily. What's the one that gets rid of corruption and injustice? If you're stuck, look at it this way. Where and to whom do we take people who are physically sick? To doctors, Socrates. Where do we take people who behave unjustly and without discipline? To judges, you mean. Isn't it so they'll pay what's due? Yes, I agree. Now, don't those who administer discipline correctly employ a kind of justice in doing so? That's clear. It's financial management that gets rid of poverty, medicine that gets rid of disease, and justice that gets rid of injustice and indiscipline, apparently. Which of these, now, is the most admirable? Of which do you mean? Of financial management, medicine, and justice? Justice is by far, Socrates. Doesn't it in that case provide either the most pleasure or benefit or both, if it really is the most admirable? Yes. Now, is getting medical treatment something pleasant? Do people who get it enjoy getting it? No, I don't think so. But it is beneficial, isn't it? Yes, because they're getting rid of a great evil, so that it's worth their while to endure the pain and so get well. Of course. Now, would a man be happiest, as far as his body goes, if he's under treatment, or if he weren't even sick to begin with? If he weren't even sick, obviously. Because happiness evidently isn't a matter of getting rid of evil, it's rather a matter of not even contracting it to begin with. That's so. Very well. Of two people, each of whom has an evil in either body or soul, which is the more miserable one, the one who is treated and gets rid of the evil, or the one who doesn't but keeps it? The one who isn't treated, it seems to me. Now, wasn't paying what's due getting rid of the greatest evil, corruption? It was. Yes, because such justice makes people self-controlled, I take it, and more just. It proves to be a treatment against corruption. Yes. The happiest man, then, is the one who doesn't have evil in his soul, now that this has been shown to be the most serious kind of evil. That's clear. And second, I suppose, is the man who gets rid of it. Evidently. This is the man who gets lectured and lashed, the one who pays what is due. Yes. The man who keeps it then, and who doesn't get rid of it, is the one whose life is the worst. Apparently. Isn't this actually the man who, although he commits the most serious crimes and uses methods that are most unjust, succeeds in avoiding being lectured and disciplined and paying his due, as Archelaus, according to you, and the other tyrants, orators, and potentates have put themselves in a position to do? Evidently. Yes, my good man, I take it that these people have managed to accomplish pretty much the same thing as a person who has contracted very serious illness, but by avoiding treatment manages to avoid paying what's due to the doctors for his bodily faults, fearing, as would a child, cauterization or surgery because they're painful. Don't you think so too? Yes, I do. It's because he evidently doesn't know what health and bodily excellence are like. For on the basis of what we've now agreed on, it looks as though those who avoid paying what is due also do the same sort of thing, Polus. They focus on its painfulness, but are blind to its benefit, and are ignorant of how much more miserable it is to live with an unhealthy soul than with an unhealthy body, a soul that's rotten with injustice and impiety. This is also the reason they go to any length to avoid paying what is due and getting rid of the greatest evil. They find themselves funds and friends and ways to speak as persuasively as possible. Now, if what we've agreed on is true, Polus, are you aware of what things follow from our argument, or would you like us to set them out? Yes, if you think we should, anyhow. Does it follow that injustice and doing what is unjust is the greatest evil? Yes, apparently. And it has indeed been shown that paying what is due is what gets rid of this evil. So it seems. And that if it isn't paid, the evil is retained. Yes. So doing what's unjust is the second most serious evil. Not paying what's due when one has done what's unjust is by its nature the most serious and foremost evil of all. Evidently. Now, wasn't this the point in dispute between us, my friend? You considered Archelaus happy, a man who committed the gravest crimes without paying what was due, whereas I took the opposite view, that whoever avoids paying his due for his wrongdoing, whether he's Archelaus or any other man, deserves to be miserable beyond all other men, and that one who does what's unjust is always more miserable than the one who suffers it, and the one who avoids paying what's due always more miserable than the one who does pay it. Weren't these the things I said? Yes. Hasn't it been proved that what was said is true? Apparently. Fair enough. If these things are true, then, Polus, what is the great use of oratory? For on the basis of what we've agreed on now, what a man should guard himself against most of all is doing what's unjust, knowing that he will have trouble enough if he does. Isn't that so? Yes, that's right. And if he or anyone else he cares about acts unjustly, he should voluntarily go to the place where he'll pay his due as soon as possible. He should go to the judge as though he were going to a doctor, anxious that the disease of injustice shouldn't be protracted and cause his soul to fester incurably. What else can we say now, Polus, if our previous agreements really stand? Aren't these statements necessarily consistent with our earlier ones in only this way? Well, yes, Socrates, what else are we to say? So, if oratory is used to defend injustice, Polus, one's own or that of one's relatives, companions or children, or that of one's country, when it acts unjustly, it is of no use to us at all, unless one takes it to be useful for the opposite purpose, that he should accuse himself first and foremost, and then to his family and anyone else dear to him who happens to behave unjustly at any time, and that he should not keep his wrongdoing hidden, but bring it out into the open, so that he may pay his due and get well, and compel himself and the others not to play the coward, but to grit his teeth and present himself with grace and courage as to a doctor for cauterization and surgery, pursuing what's good and admirable without taking any account of the pain. And if his unjust behavior merits flogging, he should present himself to be whipped, and if it merits imprisonment, to be imprisoned, if a fine, to pay it, if exile, to be exiled, and if execution, to be executed. He should be his own chief accuser, and the accuser of other members of his family, and use his oratory for the purpose of getting rid of the greatest evil, injustice, as the unjust acts are being exposed. Are we to affirm or deny this, Polus? I think these statements are absurd, Socrates, though no doubt you think they agree with those expressed earlier. Then either we should abandon those, or else these necessarily follow. Yes, that's how it is. And, on the other hand, to reverse the case, suppose a man had to harm someone, an enemy or anybody at all, provided that he didn't suffer anything unjust from this enemy himself, for this is something to be on guard against. If the enemy did something unjust against another person, then our man should see to it in every way, both in what he does and what he says, that his enemy does not go to the judge and pay his due, and that if he does go, he should scheme to get his enemy off without paying what's due. If he's stolen a lot of gold, he should scheme to get him not to return it, but to keep it and spend it in an unjust and godless way, both on himself and his people. And if his crimes merit the death penalty, he should scheme to keep him from being executed, preferably never to die at all, but to live forever in corruption, but failing that, to have him live as long as possible in that condition. Yes, this is the sort of thing I think oratory is useful for, Polus, since for the person who has no intention of behaving unjustly, it doesn't seem to me to have much use, if in fact it has any use at all, since its usefulness hasn't in any way become apparent so far.